The Center Cannot Hold. Works by Susan Collis. Words by Glenn Adamson. The Poetry of Plastic. It's not exactly well-charted territory. Roland Barthes in Mythologies dedicated a few pages to the material. More than a substance, he wrote, plastic is the very idea of its infinite transformation. As its everyday name indicates, it is ubiquity made visible. In the 1980s, British sculptor Tony Cragg established his reputation with a series of large-scale works, composed of found plastic items. Ignoring the object's forms and functions, he instead focused on their artificial colors, arranging them into various configurations. An artist's palette, a Union Jack, a rainbow. Then there is the 1999 film American Beauty, with its memorable scene of a white plastic bag dancing unpredictably in a crosswind. It seems possessed with animate spirit. A young man who captured the moment on video shows it to the girl he loves. As they watch, he haltingly confesses how much it moved him. Sometimes there's so much beauty in the world, I feel like I can't take it, and my heart is just going to cave in. To this brief canon, we can now add Susan Collis's The Center Cannot Hold. It consists of 4 drawings, executed with blue biro and pencil on paper, which appear from a distance, and that is how one sees them, pinned up on the wall with platinum hardware, to be the remnants of a single plastic tarp. The work was inspired by a sight outside of Collis's studio window. In a case of life following cinematic art, a plastic cover was held fast at its corners, pulled this way and that in the wind. It was an ever-changing spectacle, an abstract Promethean struggle. In Collis's sculptural response to this chance encounter, it's as if some force has ripped the sheet from its moorings, leaving only the anchor points and a yawning gap between them. A visitor who saw the drawings in their first presentation aptly described them as shredded survivors of a collapsed middle. It's impossible to miss the undertone of political urgency in that viewer's response. Collis's tattered Trump Lloyd tarp is perfectly calibrated to our times, when all the moderate voices, the broad middle, seem to have gone missing. The title of the work alludes to W.B. Yeats' poem, The Second Coming, first published in 1919. As an evocation of disquiet, its first stanza has never been bettered. Turning and turning in the widening gyre, the falcon cannot hear the falconer. Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere. The ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are filled with passionate intensity. Sound familiar? Yeats was responding to the insanity of World War I. A century on, though, the poem is newly charged with relevance. The feeling of disorientation that it captures so indelibly, the drowning of sanity in a sea of passionate intensity, is fast becoming the reality in Britain, with its Brexit-ravaged public discourse, and all the more so in America, where our leader has adopted mere anarchy as a tactic of governance. At such an ideologically divided time, it is debatable where the center really is, and what will happen if it loses its grip. This is where Collis performs useful service. Her work can be seen in the light of recent politics, but it by no means insists. At a time of ubiquitous shouting, Collis barely whispers. Of course, we lean into here. The quiet certitude of the work, its conviction, to use Yeats's term, might itself be understood as a political principle. Inquire beyond the deadpan perfectionism, though, and you'll discover deep wells of feeling. That makes sense. How else could she maintain the motivation, the sheer drive, to execute such extraordinary levels of craft? She is very conscious of her place in the tradition of art making, and not making, that descends from Marcel Duchamp's ready-mades. In her hands, the strategy comes to occupy traditional genres, as if through the back door. The center cannot hold is nominally a suite of drawings. Similarly, her overalls and dropcloths appear to be paint on canvas. The planks and tables and step ladders she makes are wood sculpture. And though some of her titles do provide a way into the work emotionally, for all the things we thought we'd love forever, or cursed with a soul, they often act as further moves in an art historical game, one in which Collis seems to have invented the rules. She is an artist who thinks holistically about her place in the world. When given an institutional platform, she considers it in every dimension. Not just how a gallery looks, but where it is, who works there, and what they seem to want of her. For a professional curator, that makes her both a delight and a challenge to work with. In Des Moines, she has reprised one of her most demanding works, a pail that receives a steady drip of water from the ceiling. It sounds simple, but is surprisingly maddening when installed. It conveys the impression of an organization falling apart at the seams. At one of its seams, anyway. In fact, the opposite is the case. The work requires a hidden circulation system to convey the water across the floor, up the wall, and across the ceiling, where it can drip and drip and drip. The work is rich with associations. Among them, Duchamp's fountain. After all, that is what Collis's ever-flowing pail is. And the mordant phrase, kicking the bucket. Its primary metaphor, though, is the hole it pokes in the institutional fabric. The other thing about the drip, of course, is that it's sad. There is something poignant about the bucket and its plight, a downtroddenness that is one of Collis's leitmotifs. The pail's perpetual motion, meanwhile, makes it feel like a portal to the infinite. This is the power of Collis's work. She connects the far extremes of experience, the most banal and the most wondrous, pulling them together into a tight knot. On the one hand, every reviewer remarks on the little epiphanies offered by her work, so immediate that even children can enjoy them, perhaps children above all. Such pleasures are rare in contemporary art. On the other, there is no getting away from the melancholic undertow. Even the names of her exhibitions are largely a litany of dejection. All this falling, so it goes. Why did I think this was a good idea? And don't get your hopes up. Those unacquainted with the British sense of humor might miss how very funny all this is. Yet she is also very seriously situating herself at a specific moment in art history. An artist friend of mine once told me she hated Picasso. I asked her, how could that possibly be? She replied, he took all the good ideas before anyone else could have them. It was a fair point, and one that could be expanded to encompass all the glories of 20th century art. The thrilling discovery of abstraction, the vitality of abstract expressionism, even the ascetic pleasures of minimalism. What do we have now? Critical distance. We arrived late to the party. Collis is the great poet of this post-lapsarian mode, finding meaning in the remnants. She has said that she sees her sculptures as being like ghosts of other works that have taken place. This is a more specific observation than might at first be apparent, added to the long list of things that are not at first apparent. In a more general sense, Collis is acutely aware of operating in the expanded field of art, and a time that is often characterized as the post-studio era. Her own practice could not be more studio-based. Yet she has found a way to turn her workspace inside out, making it a refractory hall of mirrors for the world beyond. That impulse was doubtless present as she gazed out her window at that flapping tarp. It is given fullest rein in her ambitious multi-part sculptures. Like all of Collis's work, but at an even higher level of intensity, these sprawling arrangements vibrate with contradiction. We see random detritus, but we also know that we are looking at a compendium of carefully wrought form. I have already spoken of her work's resonance with certain artists of the past. Very occasionally, she revisits a specific monument from the modernist canon, as with her transcription of Malevich's Black Square. By patiently documenting every crack of its weathered surface, she emphasized the radical icon's fallibility, its exposure to the inexorable forces of time, the very history that it was meant to transcend. This leads us to a final nuance in Collis's work. She adapts the usual operations of spectacular art and turns them inside out. Not a baffling display of concealed craft, but a transparent truth machine. Her work is initially obscure, even deceptive, but that only makes for a more intriguing invitation to close looking. A great magician, she is more than willing to reveal her secrets. Thus, Collis offers an alternative to our culture of alternative facts. It is this quality of genuineness that makes her arrival in America so well timed. All the more so in Iowa, where, in common with much of the country, industries like agriculture, construction, and manufacturing, trades in which tarpaulins, overalls, and brooms actually see daily use, remain the bedrock. That bedrock is showing fissures. It is still there, though, and still deserving of our respect. Collis's work radiates belief in the dignity of such occupations. Each of her creations is a tour de force of skill, persistently and patiently applied, and there's a subtle ethics to that commitment. A presumption of equality across all forms of labor. She knows well that art has a reputation, much deserved, as an elite enterprise. She also knows, though, that her hours and efforts are no better than anyone else's. She simply chooses to use them in a very particular way, to create quiet astonishments, one after another. That's all there is to it. And it is more than enough.